Happy New Year. Yeah, it's officially here. Have you actually lived up to any of your resolutions yet? Well, I'm working on one now. We'll talk about that in a moment. But perhaps you are too. And in fact, I hope you are planning on more hunting in 2025 than you did in 2024. Who could argue against that? Nobody in this group, that's for sure. I'm Scott Linden. Welcome to the Upland Nation podcast. Lots to cover. Learned a lot from you folks in the Upland Nation Index survey. Talk more about that and why we're doing this particular podcast today. Yes, it's a public access twofer. That's right. The first half of the program will be about a tank full of gas to get to great pheasant hunting somewhere in the West. Yeah, I'll name names and talk about places to go. And with luck, you can use that information to plan a trip in the future, whether it's later this season or maybe next season. Now's the time to start looking at that stuff. The second half of the podcast will include pretty much the same idea for southeast quail. So if you're down in that neck of the woods and you're looking for places to go, I'll have some suggestions for you. All of it based on my own on-the-ground observation, and hopefully it will help you acquire more spots that you can visit in the next few seasons. In addition, of course, you'll have a chance to win a set of Chad Hodges choke tubes, $195 value from TrulockChokes.com in our Fur Feathers Friends sweepstakes. The Handle It segment, now called Fix It. I will advise you on some of the hard lessons I've learned about those online mapping apps and how you want to be careful about using them when you're going to or planning for some of that public access hunting we're going to talk about. And finally, we will talk about some of the things that you are really interested in based on that Upland Nation Index. Number one on the list, of course, finding more places to hunt. I'm going to help you with that today, but also some of the other things that you would love to know about yourself and your friends and what's going on there. Yeah, the Upland Nation podcast is made possible in part by Sage and Breaker Gun Care products, Pointer Shotguns, Mid-Valley Clays and Shooting School, Trulock Choke Tubes, MidwayUSA.com, and Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food. Well, here I'm laying my own plans for a public access odyssey south of here on dry ground. Yeah, looking out at the snow coming down yet again, and I'm not going to walk around on it. I'm just not going to do it anymore. So that's what I'm doing. So all of this talk will come in handy for me as well. I will review some of my notes personally after the fact as well. You have been of immense help, and I appreciate all of you who participated in the Upland Nation Index survey. I'll be announcing the winner of that shotgun real soon. In the meanwhile, thought you might appreciate some of the insights that I've acquired that you will now too. First on the list, of all the dog breeds out there, what are the most prevalent amongst you and your friends who listen, read, watch the TV show? Well, number one on the list, 22% of you tell me Labradors are your breed of choice. Coming up close, and probably statistically at least, in a dead heat, German short-haired pointers. Yeah, about 20%, probably, the margin of error is probably 5%. So you're right up there as well. The one that was, kind of surprising to me, number 3 on the list, English setters. Yeah, I'll put the whole list together at some point. You can take a look at that probably on the social media pages. So stick around for that. Visit anytime. There's always a question or two that will help out your fellow hunters on the, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So follow that stuff, and I'll give you back some answers as well. And when it comes to the most important thing you want help with, what is the thing that is highest on your list of priorities? Another tie. You want help finding more places to hunt? Gee, Scott, why don't you do a podcast? Oh, I am. And help with dog training. Well, we're going to do both of those, and I promise you even more. If you took the survey, you know that was one of the goals, was to help me craft topics to help you. Those are all part of the Upland Nation podcast content philosophy, and you'll be the beneficiary as we just move along through 2025. You want to start your new year on the right foot? How about a new shotgun? PointerShotguns.com has a large selection, all gauges, all configurations, semis, over and unders, side-by-sides, and all those great finishes. From nickel to blued to case colored to Cerakote in 3 different shades. If you're thinking about going from one to the other, it's a great way to experiment. Yeah, let's just say you want your first side-by-side. Yeah, no big commitments. Yeah, side-by-side for under $700 in any gauge. Go to PointerShotguns.com, shop the selection, and then find a dealer near you and pick up one of those cool side-by-sides. And take care of your guns and everything else when it comes to shooting, hunting in the outdoors at MidwayUSA.com. Yeah, that's where I went for a lot of my Christmas gifts. For other people, but me too. Yeah, they have a little bit of everything. Let me think about that. I guess socks for somebody, ammo for somebody special. That would be me. Some new camping gear. And then great outdoor kitchen. Yeah, this kind of stuff is all over the place. Yeah, if you're big into the nutrition thing, energy bars of all sorts, protein bars, Mountain Ops is one of their big participants in that category. Check out the entire selection at MidwayUSA.com. Yeah, and if you order before 3 p.m. Eastern Time, your order ships that day. MidwayUSA.com. Customer satisfaction is their number one goal. Well, I cobbled together some notes on some of the places I've been that might help you. I'm not going to give you latitudes and longitudes, but I'm going to give you at least some starting points in this part of the show, which I'm going to suggest you could reach probably from anywhere on a tank of gas if you're in that state. Yeah, some of the West's best public access pheasant hunting. Now, it's debatable. We're not talking about South Dakota level hunting or even Iowa or North Dakota. But there is still some pheasant hunting in the West that might be worth a look if you desperately got to have it. I'll start with a little story. I was walking a lush swale, and this was with Flick, so it was kind of fun. He was very young at the time. And it had a little water winding down the middle, just enough to keep, 20 yards on each side of that creek nice and green. I jumped across it. It was more like a little tiny irrigation ditch than anything. Jumped across. And as I was in midair, that's, of course, when the ringneck got up in front of Flick. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt and suggest it was a flashpoint. He was very young. I did have time to land, close the gun, plant both feet, and shoot it. Bam! Okay, bam again. Yeah, it took 2 shots. But it had gotten up so close to me that, I was jumping basically where it was, that I did hit it on the second shot, and it landed in the thickest part. Flick, of course, stood on his hind legs to see where it fell, and then made a beeline for it. You know that look. They can't smile. There's a big bird in their mouth, but you know that look. And then the way they prance back to you when they know everything went right. Yeah, that was Flick that day. Now, the funny part is, it was not in one of those pheasant capitals of the world. Yeah, that bird dropped from clear blue big sky. Remember that? Montana. It's one of the many places that I've been on a TV show or just for fun that has at least a huntable population of pheasants on public access ground. The good news is not as many people go there as go to those other big-time pheasant capitals of the world. They're not as well known as the hotbed states, but for a lot of us here in the West, they're a lot closer. So if maybe you're restricted to your own area code or time zone and you want to hunt public access, take heart. The odds are lower, but there will be fewer hunters, and in many cases, you're within a tank full of gas. So here are some starting points for a homegrown pheasant odyssey that sometimes rivals some of those big states, or at the minimum gives you a realistic chance to find a ring-necked pheasant. Let's just have a moment of silence here for the late, great state of California. No, not for the political situation, although I think, in my opinion, I think that's part of what contributed to the challenge. But up until the late 20th century, Northern California had an unbelievable reputation for bountiful pheasant hunting. Yeah, I got in on some of that. And one of my buddies, Dave, who's grown up down there, was there for the halcyon days. He lived in rice country, and that's what the birds were eating there, and they were everywhere. Well, they're not everywhere now, but they're still pretty good. Adjust your expectations. Look to the yellow bypass wildlife area between Davis and West Sacramento. That's a good bet. Easy to access. Now, it's a bypass because sometimes they flood it with too much Sacramento River water, so you want to be careful about that. But the terrain and the habitat on a dry season is a dead ringer for some of the Iowa hunts I've made. And it's just right there in the 916 area code. Now, you do need a Type A hunting pass. You got to get it in advance, and you can only hunt on Saturdays, Sundays, and Wednesdays. But if you are up for it, sometimes the rooster hunting might even rival some of the bad days in some of the good states. Word of warning, those birds can be anywhere. The habitat can be real thick right where you're parked. So explore every inch of that ground over there. The yellow bypass wildlife area. Okay, heading north into the 503 area code for some people. Oregon. Now, little history lesson if you don't know this one already. Oregon is the first place pheasants were successfully introduced in the U.S. Thank you, Judge Owen Denny, who was the diplomatic consul to Shanghai, I think it was at the time. That was back in 1881 when he shipped over a couple cratefuls, and it's, hey, the rest is history, as they say. But anyway, there still are birds here. They've, interestingly enough, migrated, well, their population has moved from the western part of the state, the Willamette Valley, as farming practices have changed. They've moved over the Cascades into our country over here on the dry side, and now they're even farther away for the most part, almost always near the Idaho border. If you're willing to drive, there's a unique public land hunt worth the drive, and only about 16 gallons of gas from Eugene, Oregon is what I figured out. That'll put you on the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge near Burns, Oregon. Now, I drive by it a lot. I've hunted there and loved it. It's a refuge for primarily migratory birds, but also, as a result of that, has pretty good habitat for resident birds that were either introduced or migrated there on their own, including some ring-necked pheasants. Now, you want to be careful about where you go in places like that because some parts are open and some parts are not. You really, whenever you're hunting a refuge, you really need to check in at the headquarters, whether it's required or not. Get the map, make sure you know you're in the right places, and then always bring non-toxic shot when you're on a federal national wildlife refuge. There's some crops, there's a lot of water, there's a variety of cover. Most of the hunting I like is in one particular area. I'll let you discover it yourself. But if you're there, bring some quail loads as well, because valley quail are just as likely to get up from in front of your flushing or your pointing dog. The thicker the cover, the better. As a bird refuge, you can imagine the avian predators are there in force as well. In fact, one of the few places where I've seen there's a type of owl. I've forgotten what kind it is, but it usually hunts at night, like most owls. But there's so much food, they become daylight hunters on the Malheur Refuge. Hey, if you're there, you may as well cross the other side to the west side of the state highway and climb those hills for chukars. Still part of the refuge, still worth the effort. Nearest town is going to be French Glen. They do have a little rustic hotel that's open, part way into the season. Camping all over the place. Or you can actually headquarters in Burns, Oregon. Just be careful about the season length there. Sometimes they cut it off a little sooner than other years. Don't ask me why. But there's Oregon for you. You're listening to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. Yeah, I'm spilling the tea, as they say, on some places that can handle a little bit more traffic and that might get you a fix if you have lived a righteous life and support local conservation groups and bring a friend or a newcomer. Okay, those are my rules. Go ahead. Feel free to adhere to them. All right, I started with a Montana story, and I'm going to cover another one now. It is, in the West at least, the closest you'll come to a pheasant mecca. Number one, you've heard me laud their walk-in program. Private ground open to public hunting. They call it block management access over there. It can be great. It's easy to negotiate. And some of the habitat is incredible because over there, landowners only get paid by the state when people hunt on their land. So if the habitat's no good, nobody's going to hunt there. 2 and 2 equals not enough then. You do want to be careful. Check the department's maps. Remember that late summer they update all those maps. And then make sure you e-scout so that you're finding the right habitat. Water, cover, edges between crops and CRP, those are all good ones. You're not going to find near as much grain growing as in the Dakotas, but you will find some. And quite often, alfalfa is a good substitute. Not because the birds eat a lot of alfalfa, but they eat a lot of bugs that live in the alfalfa. Now, I remember hunting with, my friend Al Gadori from the podcast and the TV shows, hunting with him for fun somewhere out near Lewistown. And I must have done something good in the universe because we jumped sage grouse, sharp-tails, and roosters on the same piece of block management property. Don't worry. I missed them all. Finally dragged down one sage grouse. Yeah, and the joy of Montana is certain times a year, You can shoot them all. Make sure you plan your trip accordingly. If you headquarter along the kind of the eastern half of the high line, that's Highway 2, way up north, there's lots of walk-in country. There's lots of federal ground. There's even some state ground near towns like Glasgow and Malta. And a little bit of that looks a little bit like the grasslands of South Dakota. So if you're used to that, well, that'll be like kind of like a homecoming for you. But it'll be a day's drive closer than South Dakota. Region 6 is the map you want from the Fish, Wildlife, and Park Department in their block management library. Now they send them all in one big book. It's a little bit harder to negotiate, but they also send single sheets, much bigger. So get them all, plan in advance. Some of those places need advance reservations. Most don't, but most will absolutely expect you to sign in at the kiosk. Yeah, that's Montana. And boy, Montana, congratulations. You've done a great job. There's so much to do there. In fact, the only town I know of where you can go have a beer at the tavern, look down through one of the tables, clear glass top, and see trout swimming in a stream. Do your research. Find that place. It's in central Montana. Now, Washington, kind of the redheaded stepchild for the West, but it does have something that most of the other states don't have much of anymore, and that's amber waves of grain, with some of the land adjacent to it open to public hunting. Their program is called Feel Free to Hunt or something like that. Check their website for a good list of properties. Do your e-scouting. Dial your habitat needs in Grant, Whitman, and Walla Walla counties. There's wheat, there's canola, there's a little bit of wheatgrass and berries that may end up in a bird's crop, but the two big crops over there are wheat and canola. And, you know, if you're from farther away and you've ever hunted Kansas, this might be the best analog here in the West. A little bit more fold in the landscape, but at least you're not crossing 6 states to get there. If you like chukar and quail, the breaks of the Snake River, yeah, Hell's Canyon. Go to the gym for a couple of years and then head for the Snake River and Hell's Canyon. The joy of Hell's Canyon is you can start at the top and hunt some of the high stuff without having to climb up to it, but most of the time you will. But the birds are often right there at the edge. And they could be pheasants, they could be chukars, they could be huns. And then down in those valleys, there are quail. Oh, a bonus if you're in that Walla Walla area. Take an Uber out to the old World War II era airport, which is now an incubator for budding wineries and winemakers. So when you get your glass poured at one of those wineries, it'll be poured by the owner and vintner. Kind of cool. Got to get there before the end of December, though. That's when most of the seasons close over there. All right, a quick look at some of the other states that I've had success in the West. If you're in Colorado, all right, I gotta confess, when I'm in Colorado, I drive north, cross the border. It's not that far, and so if you're anywhere near the northern border of Colorado, if you want pheasants, that's one place to find them. You can drive all the way to the east side and hunt Kansas as well. But Sidney, Nebraska, but you can go north of the border into Nebraska, drive through Lorenzo, Colorado, head to the area just south of Sidney, Nebraska. Lots of CRP in that area. Cornfields, interesting terraces. I remember walking, literally almost stepping on a ringneck in one of those terraces. They got little ditches at the downhill edge of most of those terraces. And sure enough, that's where it was hunkered down in about 6-inch grass. Beer can height grass, as Red Steagall says in one of those songs. You can also hunt southwest Wyoming. Now that's put and take over there, but the department does a pretty good job of it. And there are chuckers and huns near Torrington. Made a couple shows out there. When we were invited out there, I said, chuckers in Wyoming? Boy, it looked just like my favorite chucker country over here. And that's just a couple hours from Laramie. There is some pheasant hunting out there as well. The Springer Wildlife Habitat Management Area is one place you might go if you're near Torrington. Another is the Thunder Basin National Grassland in northeastern Wyoming. Birds there, if you're in the area, worth a drive? Yeah, probably. Finally, Idaho. Probably the most classically agricultural state of all of them in the West. Maybe not the biggest, but it just has that look about it. It says pheasants in large part in the Magic Valley of Idaho. It's kind of, I'll call it the east central part of the southern part of the state. Just Google Magic Valley. You'll find some towns you recognize in that area. They do stock pheasants. So if you're in one of the wildlife management areas, you might find stock birds. Hey, better than no birds. Check the department website for where they're putting birds and that sort of thing. They also have lots of walk-in ground out there. They call it Access Yes in Idaho. If you're near an irrigated field, I would bust the brush near the ditches or the creeks or rivers nearby, and enjoy yourself in a state that doesn't get near the hunting pressure. There are good reasons for that, but while you're there, of course, there's also plenty of other things to do. So there you go. Some Western U.S. public access, primarily for pheasants, but there's other birds out there as well. I hope that helps you. And like I said, if you're going to take me up on any of those invitations, do me a big favor. Take somebody else along who deserves a trip. Newcomer, old friend who got out of the world, needs to come back, spouse, child, all of the above. Okay, well, that's the first half of the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. We'll have more, including some Southeast U.S. quail public access after the Fix It segment, where we're going to talk about words of warning when it comes to your online mapping app, and also a chance to win this month's prize in the Fur Feathers Friends promotion. That'll be a set of brand new, just released Chad Hodges Upland Chokes from TrulockChokes.com. That's all coming up right after this. From HighVisSites.com. Yeah, a lot of, especially here in the West, a lot of the places I hunt birds are in deep canyons that run east to west. So what happens? The sun moves a little bit. I'm in shadow most of the day. I do believe that the light pipe systems from High-Vis Sites shine, pardon the pun, in those conditions. For you, it might be the end of the day, or it might be cloudy or rainy, foggy conditions. Change out the color of your light pipe however you need it. Or if you're colorblind, go to the brightest one available and see if it changes your shooting success. It does for me, and it might for you. Learn more about how it all works at highvissites.com. sights.com. And if you're out in inclement conditions, or even if you're not, you want to take care of your shotgun. And some of the stuff that's always in the back of my truck and always gets used at the end of the day. I use the bore cleaning system from Sage and Breaker. It's more than just a, quote, bore snake, unquote. It's got some other attributes, including a brass brush and detachability. You can run one or more pieces through your bore. The other one is their CLP spray-on liquid. Keeps your gun lubricated, it cleans it, and it protects it from corrosion, and it even kind of keeps the dust off to a degree. Learn more about all of that and all of their soft goods from their shotgun cleaning map, which I will hand out in a week or two for the first part of the Fur Feathers Friends promotion, to range bags. Stand by for more news on those. Learn more at sageandbreaker.com. Welcome back to the Upland Nation podcast. I'm Scott Linden. Yes, sharing some of my observations, my experiences to help you become a better public access hunter, cluing you into some of the places that I think can stand a little bit more visitation, if you will, especially from conservation-minded hunters like you, as long as you bring somebody else along. That's the whole point behind the Fur Feathers Friends initiative that we're warming up with right now. And don't forget about that prize. I'll ask you the word of the week later on in the podcast. Right now, if you live in the Southeast, or if you're headed there for some reason, yeah, there may not be near as much public access quail hunting as there used to be when you could knock on any farmer's door. But there still is a little bit. There is hope for all of us. And you don't have to land your Gulfstream jet on the private airstrip, get whisked from the airstrip to the gunroom of a palatial mansion straight out of Gone with the Wind, where you're issued your own personal Purdy side-by-side for the week. Whether you're that guy or the rest of us, there does happen to be a little bit of public quail hunting down in the Southeast. If you're there anyway, might be the best way to describe the rationale for going down and trying that. Enjoy the journey and the destination. Even in plantation country, there is stuff you can find if you just work at it. Remember the kid who wakes up on Christmas Eve and the only thing he sees is a pile of manure in the backyard? He runs out digging. Parents ask him, "Why are you digging out there?" "Well, there might be a pony underneath here." Well, that's the quail hunting in Southeast U.S. most of the time for public access guys like us. Girls too. All right. But there is a strategy or 10 that you might imply, and that's what we're going to talk about today. First off, you got to find the places. And the devil is in the technological details. I was lucky enough to bring my dog down once. This was Manny, I think. So he was probably 5 at the time. And he slammed on the brakes in one, I don't know what to call it, a plantation-like timber stand. Very park-like, you know, tall, straight pines, very few limbs going up until the top. Lots of low brush or no brush, just grass. It looks like the stuff you see in the magazine articles, and we were lucky enough to find it in the middle of nowhere, actually. But before I could get close enough to him to even try a shot, I had to cross over a big ditch. I guess I'd be over it. It was dry. That helped a little bit. But as I got slipped and slide down the ditch, there comes the bobwhites going over my head. They were too close for a pass shot, and by the time I got out of the ditch, they were long gone. But we followed them on. Oh, I did take a shot anyway. All I shot was a couple limbs off the pine trees. I think they're called loblollies down there. I'm not sure what kind of pine that really is. But I was still encouraged because that was public ground in Alabama. Yeah, there's stuff like that all over the Southeast, whether it's administered by a government agency or, it's all done that way. Some federal ground, some state ground, and a lot of walk-in country that may or may not be good. You'll never know until you go out and try it. And what's worse than that? A lot of things. Gee, I get to walk in the woods with my dog, maybe a friend or two, and possibly find a quail or two. Well, it sure beats painting the living room, doesn't it? So use technology, be patient, and be persistent. Use all aspects of your mobile phone. Make the calls. Use the e-scouting app that you like. And then take everything with a few grains of salt, because you'll get a lot of dubious advice. A lot of people trying to keep you out of their favorite spots. And just in general, the governmental monolith requires a lot of energy to get it off equilibrium. The good news is most hunters won't work that hard, so you'll have a leg up on most of them. All right, first and foremost, here's some spots in Texas, of all places. Yeah, public quail hunting in Texas. It's mainly on private land, so it's a walk-in program. You need a 48, at least last I checked, it cost me $48. But it's good for the whole year, and it opens several thousand acres of walk-in access. There's a little publicly owned ground, but not much in Texas. That's one of the hallmarks of the state, I think, now that I've envisioning the map and the different colors on there. But there is a little bit. Go if you're near the town of Tilden, or you know where it is. The James E. Dotrey Wildlife Management Area is down in that country and worth a look. Another spot is a Las Palomas Wildlife Management Area. That's in the lower Rio Grande Valley. So there's a couple spots in Texas you might want to take a look at. All right. Now, when you're hunting for spots, remember that in different states, their public access program, their walk-in programs are called different things. So when you Google, start with, quote, walk-in areas in whatever state. That'll generally get you at least to the right page on the department's website. Then you can get familiar with how it works, what it costs, if it costs anything. And remember, most of the time, that access is free because we've paid a surcharge on our license or some other additional fee. That's well worth it right there. But it opens all that private ground to people like us. We were in a place like that a while back, and all we saw were rows of, there's in some parts of the country, people are still logging pine trees in particular. Way up northeast, there's a little bit in privately owned ground in the northwest, and then down there, a lot of those longleaf pines are being logged, which is good and bad. It depends on your timing. So we were walking a row of that. They're all in straight rows when they're going to be cut again. And these particular longleafs, they looked like they knew the chainsaw was en route. That's how sad it was. Yeah, maybe that's how they look all the time. I'm not sure. Up here, our trees are a little bit more optimistic these days. Anyway, we'd spent the time on the computers. We'd made the phone calls. I talked with the caretaker, and we got permission to walk these rows on this walk-in area. We actually heard a call or two in the distance, and dogs would get a whiff here and there, but nothing. But we only knew that because we walked it all. And if there's nobody, what's another way to put it? Look up hope in the dictionary. There'll be a guy wearing blaze orange. That's why we go. And that's why it's called hunting, not shooting. Still worth the walk. The dogs didn't know any better. They got a whiff here and a whiff there and plenty of exercise. It worked for me. So don't be discouraged. You know as well as I, that could happen anywhere, anytime. And again, it still beats mowing the grass. Okay, Alabama. They call it Forever Wild. That's their walk-in program. In Texas, it's just called public hunting areas. No, they don't get any points for creativity. Whatever it's called, some states have nailed it. They've got maps, maybe an online app, lists. Some of them even offer up a little bit of hunting advice. Dubious or not, I don't know. I've had mixed results, but again, better than watching football. In Georgia, at the D Lane Wildlife Management Area, that's DI. I guess down there they say Die Lane, probably. That's near Waynesboro. If you're in Georgia, some of the wildlife management areas that are worth taking a look at are Clarks Hill, Blanton Creek, Clybell, Oakey Woods, Ocmulgee, and El Model. You know, if I was going down that country, I might pack a fishing rod too. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again. For the most part, this land is your land. Sometimes your best bet is on land owned by a state or federal agency that's managing it on our behalf. Yeah, that's right. They work for us. Could be a wildlife refuge, management area, national forest, some military installations. Most of those, most of the time, in most of the country for that matter, are open to hunting. Don't neglect some of the smaller agencies that control big chunks of land. Army Corps of Engineers, the Bureau of Reclamation. In the Southeast, the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. A lot of agencies control thousands of acres near lakes and other pieces of water. And a lot of them may have a waterfowl conservation goal, but I'll bet most of that ground is dry most of the year. There are some fantastic upland hunts. In fact, that reminds me, I'm going to start working on a story about that, on waterfowl refuges. Just don't forget to use non-toxic ammo. I'm Scott Linden. This is the Upland Nation podcast, kind of sharing my public access ideas. We did pheasants. We're doing quail in the southeast now, and some more practical tips, and that'll come up in just a moment as well when we get to the Fix It segment, which will be followed, of course, by the Word of the Week. So check out all those publicly owned pieces of ground. And then if there are big chunks of timber, or if there's a mining company, oil and gas developers, pipelines of various sorts, ask around and learn more about their policies on hunting access. Start at the corporate website, make some calls, check with local, maybe national conservation groups. They might have a project in the area that's open to hunting. I would hope so. All of that is where you start. Then you got to develop a strategy. And none of that comes easy. But neither do wild bobwhites. More than once I've had a bureaucrat try and steer me astray, either because they won't return your calls or they actually send you on the upland version of a wild goose chase. I was in one spot, this was in the West, but it's still a good illustration of what can happen. I talked to the wildlife biologist for this one area that already hunted, but I was looking for more help, more access, more starting points. And I said, well, what about that spot over there? And he said, oh, there's nothing there. Nobody goes there. There's no birds left. I went anyway, and who did I meet pulling into the parking lot? That guy. He was coming back with a couple quail in his vest already. Remember I talked about applying a few grains of salt to all the information you get? Well, there's a hard-won lesson right there. Yes, there are a lot of hard-working, dedicated, helpful public employees, and I hope you find them. Now remember, just a little pep talk for you here. You could get lucky and just drive past one of those signs that says, "Welcome to Hunt," or the sign-in kiosk. But most of the time, you have to start planning earlier, especially in the Southeast where there's proportionally less ground. Plan in the summertime, double check in late summer for any updates to the access list. You might need to reserve your spot. Probably need to sign in and sign out. If you can get there and scout before the season opens, all the better. At least you can do that online. Yeah, there's probably a bumper sticker somewhere in the idea that planning in advance will minimize your disappointment. And when you're planning, here's some things that I've learned, again, the hard way, that may be worth considering. Ask about wildfires in the area, or whether harvest has been delayed by weather of one sort or another. Sometimes CRP ground can be grazed. And make sure roads are open. Man, some of the best hunting I've had in a couple of the Midwest states was stymied because roads were washed out. I'm glad I scouted the night before. I went around the other way and got in, and hopefully nobody else did. At least nobody I know. All right. So you're in Alabama. Okay. Waterfowling regions are often farmed for that kind of wildlife by the state. Here's one that might have some upland hunting opportunity. Blue Springs Wildlife Management Area. Now, I've not been there. I'll tell you that right off. And I don't know what the current conditions are, but if you're in that country and you're looking for quail, why not give it a look? I talk a lot about planning and preparation and all that, and I just can't tell you enough about how important it is to kind of cultivate relationships, even with folks who are just hosting you via a walk-in program. Some of those folks only do that. They enroll in the walk-in to stay away from dealing with guys like us, but others love to have some kind of report. If you can figure out whether it's appropriate to pull up into the driveway and tell them how things are going, or at least thank them for the access, I doubt you're going to get shooed off. Find a local wildlife agency office, ask the front desk guy if nobody else. That happened once. Let's see, where was that? Yeah, it's immaterial. But I was just calling, and I was looking for a wildlife biologist, maybe a bird biologist. This was big bird country, and the front desk guy who answered the phone said, "Yeah, no, he's not here." And he said, "Why? What do you want to know?" I said, "Well, I'm coming up to do some. I think I was doing some quail hunting. I think this was in the West, but it doesn't matter. He said, "Oh, well, I love to quail hunt." And we got to talking, and he gave me some starting points that ended up working pretty well. You never know. It might be the UPS driver. I've had many old codgers across the gas pump at a, country crossroads gas station tell me to go up that road or down that canyon and see what we could find. And sometimes it works. So be considerate, be circumspect, and pay it forward however you can. When you're looking for data, you might find it in the strangest places. And I got to tell you one more thing that I always do, not because I used to be in the newspaper business, but these days, newspapers are online to a large degree. I will Google quail hunting in whatever state. And it's those strange, offbeat, weird stories that might clue you in. It might be an obituary that says, "Old Joe, he used to quail hunt in this valley over here all the time." Might be a club news listing, or it might be an online forum discussion or something like that. Read between the lines. Do the research that nobody else is willing to do. Remember my realtor story. The most successful realtor I ever interviewed said, all you got to be is 10% better than everybody else. Yeah, that's how you do it. You're in Florida? Well, they have quail enhancement areas. Lots of short hunts available in January and February. Check the rulings because sometimes they change the days of the week. Go to the Apalachicola Wildlife Management Area, the Blackwater Management Area, or the Three Lakes Wildlife Management Area. Okay, one last bit of strategy, and then I'll get on to our Fix It segment and our word of the week for those Trulock Chokes. It pays to be a bit more creative in your hunting, no matter where you are. And this goes for anywhere, not just the Southeast. Edges, of course. But think about edges in a slightly different way. For example, the thick timber, if you're looking in that for birds, but you're not the first guy through that place that day or that week. Look at the best escape cover. It might be over an open spot and into a big tangle of underbrush in a little low spot, for example. They might have gone there. Look for those edges of crops. I had a biologist tell me once, if you're looking on a map and you see a straight line between public and private, the private probably has crops on it and a fence line. Makes sense to me. I'm going to try there first. That best habitat might be private right next door, but the fringes might be where the action is. All right. Well, wherever you go, pick up your empties, please, and a few extras. This year, for some reason, more and more people are complaining. Landowners are complaining, and fellow hunters are complaining about you leaving bird guts in the parking area. Number one, it's disgusting. Number two, the next guy's dog is going to eat that stuff. And of course, don't drive on fields. Be safe, practice good gait etiquette, avoid livestock. And if it's a waterfowl area, stay far away from those places where the guys in camo go. Hey, you'll have a good time. Even if you don't find a bird, your dog had a wonderful day. So did you. So did your guest, whoever it was. And it sure beats building the new deck, doesn't it? Well, this segment of the Upland Nation podcast is brought to you by TrulockChokes.com. Yeah, get your hands on those Chad Hodge Upland Chokes right now. Yeah, you could win them. That's our February prize in the Fur Feathers Friends initiative, or you can get them in your hands right now. Precision made, the tightest tolerances in the industry, a quality control program second to none, made in the USA with U.S. produced steel. Learn more about all of them, including the Chad Hodge Upland Chokes, at TrulockChokes.com. And whether he finds birds or not, your hard-working, active dog needs the fuel that will keep him going. And that is Pro Plan Sport from Purina. A lot of choices, a lot of science behind the brand. Learn more at ProPlansport.com. It's the only brand fueling the most sporting dog champions. They're out to win their game, and so are you. Learn more at ProPlansport.com. Well, if you're using an online mapping app, and who's not these days, let me give you a couple lessons that you won't have to learn the hard way. The first is very basic. You know, most of the maps on most of the apps are built around U.S. Geological Survey data, which sometimes is not quite as correct as you want it to be. Have I told you the helicopter story? I won't tell it again. Double check everything you see that is worth the effort to try and find with some other reliable source. Could be the wildlife department, it could be friends, it could be a local phone call that you make, whatever it is. Don't trust everything you read on the maps, whether it's the paper maps from the public agencies or the electronic maps on your app. Confirm everything. Ground truth it in one way or another. Sometime over a beer or 10, I'll share some of the stories that reminded me that you might be better off doing that. All right, time for our Fur Feathers Friends Word of the Week. Yes, part of the whole plan. So go to furfeathersfriends.com and learn why you should take a newcomer hunting, take a lapsed hunter hunting, take a family member, a friend. Get somebody out in the field and show off your dog. That's why we go. That's why they'll go. Yeah, to incent you to do more and more of that, I'm giving stuff away. The big prize in the summer will be a 4-pack of pointer shotguns. Over and under or side by side, your choice in all 4 gauges. In the meanwhile, we're warming up with a monthly prize, and this month, February's prize will be a pair of Trulock choke tubes. Chad Hodge Upland Chokes, brand new to the market, $195 value. Just scroll down at furfeathersfriends.com, and where it says Word of the Week, you type in pheasant. Pheasant is the word of the week. Good luck. I'll see you at furfeathersfriends.com. And our Fix It segment, brought to you this week by midvalleyclays.com. Yeah, check out Vandy Fiedler's blog posts on everything from gun fit to gun mount. Dave Fiedler is your hunter and champion target shooter and can clue you into the right way to start your shotgun search. MidValleyClays.com is sub-gauge central. They've always got 20s, 28s, and 410s in stock. Dave knows enough about all those guns to start you on your search in the right way. When you're ready to buy, they can ship anywhere. Make Dave Fiedler your shotgun guru at midvalleyclays.com. Well, I can't thank you enough for your kind attention. For those of you who responded to the Upland Nation Index survey, number 1, hey, good luck on the drawing. Number 2, I hope you enjoyed some of the insights from your fellow hunters. Do me a favor, go to Apple Podcasts these days, and rate or review the Upland Nation podcast. If you already have, hey, go ahead, do it again. And thank you to our sponsors, Sage and Breaker Gun Care Products, Purina Pro Plan Sport Dog Food, Mid Valley Clays and Shooting School, Trulock Choke Tubes, MidwayUSA.com, Pointer Shotguns, and High Vis Shooting Systems. Used up at findbirdhuntingspots.com. Until next week, I'll see you there. I'm Scott Linden. Thanks for listening to the Upland Nation Podcast.